Yeah.
And I'm not like some talk show. It's like, God, War Room's in trouble. I'll get more viewers. We need all of that. God, he was legislatively battling every little area, mobilizing. Like, he was kicking ass for us. Here's what I think. He was a social climber, political guy, smart, got in, kissed the ass of the system, got in overall, I think, as a populist patriot, but wore the ring of Mordor. And then he knew this was coming out years ago, so he really proved himself. Him and Epstein talk about, I'm going to be this media guy, so I'm going to counter. He told Epstein that too. So he wanted to reprove himself ahead of all this and build a network so important that people would forgive him for this. Steve, you need to spill your guts, and I think you'll be forgiven, because I think I get the picture of what you did. But you need to tell us that's what it is, or you're fried, bro. You're fucked. You're fucked.
New developments this morning in the case of Steve Bannon. The Justice Department is moving to dismiss the criminal case that sent him to prison for defying a subpoena from the House January 6th committee, and to wipe his conviction off the books entirely. In a filing to a federal judge, the Department of Justice said it's decided to drop the case in, quote, the interest of justice. The motion was signed by U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, and it seeks a dismissal with prejudice. That means the case could never be brought again. A jury convicted Bannon in 2022 after he refused to testify or turn over documents to congressional investigators who were probing the lead up to the Capitol attack. You may remember he served about 4 months in prison in 2024. But his appeal was still pending at the Supreme Court when the Justice Department stepped in on Monday. It asked the justices to vacate the ruling that upheld his conviction and send the case back to the lower court so it can be dismissed. If the justices agree, the conviction would be erased and the appeal would effectively end. The move comes as Bannon is also facing renewed scrutiny over his past ties to Jeffrey Epstein, following the recent release of records in the investigation. It also lands amid a broader partisan fight over contempt of Congress, with Republicans recently moving to hold Bill and Hillary Clinton in contempt in a separate Epstein-related inquiry, before both Clintons agreed to testify later this month.
Okay, Patriots, welcome. Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, February. It is the day we have the State of the Union. In case you're not paying attention, that's going to be on at 9 o'clock Eastern tonight. You saw the title of this show. It is basically War Room Civil War. And I've got to tell you, we've got a civil war coming, it would appear, thanks to some of the information that's coming out of the Epstein files. And frankly, I think a lot of it is really, really fascinating. A lot of it is probably just pure garbage, because it's just sort of a he said, she said, without any real follow-up of the FBI. Like, I don't think we're going to get any follow-up on any of this, frankly. I don't see prosecutions coming. Funny how they're arresting people over in the UK. Maybe that is a harbinger of things to come. Maybe they are the canary in the coal mine. I have no idea. But the War Room Civil War, and I'm talking about Steve Bannon's War Room, to be exact. This show isn't about personalities. As you know, I don't really get into the whole camps. I'm not really even into this whole tribal loyalty stuff. I'm really about loyal to the truth and those that are in that truth camp. So I guess that is sort of a tribal loyalty thing. But I'm not into protecting media brands. Mine has been slashed a lot of times. Even I've had inside hit jobs. So again, my old show, Steel Truth, is about the truth. And perhaps one day that story will be told too, what happened there, because there is a big story there. And it is about infiltration. But getting back to the matter at hand, for years, Steve Bannon, he built really one of the most influential platforms in the America First movement. War Room started up, if you remember, War Room Pandemic during the 2020 pandemic. It was sort of a rallying cry, rallying point. A lot of Americans, I watched it regularly. It was a huge megaphone, and Steve was on the battlefield. He brought a lot of us onto the field to fight with him. But now one of his former insiders is saying that the mask has fallen. Jack Maxey was there. You probably remember Jack Maxey early on in the War Room days. He brought up the Hunter Biden laptop. He wasn't just some casual guy sort of flowing in and out. He was a major contributor. He was definitely part of Steve's machine over there. And like I said, that Hunter Biden laptop was explosive. He sat inside that room, and now he's making some very serious accusations. I'll bring this post up again, but it ran in the opening credits about fraud, about self-dealing, betrayal, the Epstein tapes, and of course, the unreleased recordings. And we've heard about these 15 plus hours. Well, he says those tapes exist. He says they have never been seen, and he says they involve Jeffrey Epstein and Steve Bannon. And what else? He also is suggesting they may contain some conversations about President Trump. Folks, that's not a small allegation. That is a bombshell. Let's be clear on this, because Steve Bannon was federally indicted in the We Build the Wall case. He was pardoned. He then later pled guilty in a state-level fraud case in New York, and he served time for contempt of Congress. These are all facts that we've reported on. You've followed this whole story. There was a huge, Stand with Bannon campaign. But here's what's not documented. These are the tapes that we're going to be talking about. Jack Maxey claims exist. What's not documented also is the suggestion of intelligence asset status. What is not documented is what is said behind these closed doors. So let's keep it simple. Let's get this evidence out there. Let's find out if there's proof or this is a gripe or grievance. Is this truth theater? What are we looking at here? The American people deserve to know. And if those tapes contain political manipulation, the American people also deserve to know that. This is, a scandal, and there is some fallout here. I'm looking at the numbers on X, and Bannon's war room numbers are down significantly. So we got to remember some things here. Bannon built a movement, and movements will rot when leaders become untouchable. So the same thing can be said when media starts to rot. And we've watched that fish rot from the head down because a lot of those insiders, which are all in the Epstein tapes, mind you, stayed silent. We can't let this power just rot in the darkness. We're here. We're going to shine a light on it. So I don't play loyalty. I don't, look the other way. Jack Maxey says he warned people for years. He's going to get the opportunity to say it plainly. I'm giving him the opportunity with the mic. I've got a lot of questions, but I want you guys to review everything and let you decide what happens. So let's bring Jack on. And I am honored that he decided to join me today. I sent him his post that I had credited in the beginning of the show. And he said he would jump in. So thank you, Jack, for being here and bringing this to the light. I'm going to put this post up now and let's go through it.
Hey, listen, thanks for having me. I could tell you very briefly my entire story with Steve a la Epstein. I
Start there.
had never met Steve until the spring of 2018 when I was up at a dear friend's bedside who was dying. And it was meant to be a week. It ended up being 5 weeks, which was great. And Washington was coming to kiss her ring. And Steve came one day. And of course, I can't always be like, hey, you can go in. The person's sleeping sometimes. You can hang out with me or wait or whatever. First time he came, I believe it was Trump going to Helsinki. And he asked me, why do you think Trump's going to Helsinki? I said, it's got to be over Nord Stream. I mean, I'm not, some political insider here, but it would seem to me, why would you spend $500 billion on NATO if NATO's extension cord is connected to your existential enemy? And it just made sense to me. Well, Steve went out and parroted that idea, and then everyone was like, wow, Steve is so smart. Steve is so smart. Comes back like, I don't know, a week or two later, and he says, what do you think about this meeting with Kim that's been canceled? I said, listen, I'm no genius, but I as a student of the sort of Asian strongman's mindset, I've got to imagine he's just canceling it and he's going to redo it again in 10 days with him setting the meeting location, not Donald Trump, in order to show his people that he's a caudillo. That's what happens. Steve repeats it. All of a sudden, Steve is kind of back in the press as this guy who knows what's going on. Within days after that, he asked me to participate in this influence operation where there were twice a day talking points, memos concerning that day's news, etc. And this is how you're going to answer on Fox Tonight. Within 5 days, I'm running that whole program, leading the whole charge. That summer comes around. But meanwhile, again, I've only met Steve twice at this point. I'm living down in Puerto Rico. I just went home and I could do this from afar. And that's what I did. I get called up to New York for the Seeking Alpha conference with Maria Bartiromo in, I think it's July 6th or something, 7th, 8th of 2018. And Steve's the keynote speaker, and it's all going to be about China. Well, I get called up because somebody has to answer Maria Bartiromo's 47 questions, which he answers verbatim, I might add. And I wrote them about 2 hours. Well, 2 days later, I think I go to one book thing for him. It wasn't him, but we were both there together, and I shook his hand and said hello, and I hung out with him and Maria Bartiromo after the Seeking Alpha. But this is the extent of my relationship with him at this point. Well, I'm sitting with his PR agent. I guess it must have been Friday or Saturday of that week. And Page 6 calls up and says, We want to know why Steve Bannon has been going in and out of Jeffrey Epstein's house. And
Oh,
of course,
wow.
she freaks out. Like, what do you mean? They're like, yeah, he's been going in and out of the Epstein house on 71st Street, and we want to comment. And she's like, well, no comment. Let me call him back. She calls Steve, and in front of me, Steve says, oh, that's lies. I've never been in there. I've never even talked to the guy. Are you out of your mind? Blah, 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 blah. His typical shtick, lie first and, circle back to the truth eventually.
Hmm.
Well, she calls page six again, and page six says, well, we have photographs of him going in and out. We've been, photographing the people going in and out of that building, which also, I don't know why page six's photographs have never been subpoenaed because they were there 24/7, picking up Steve and everybody else coming in and out.
That's
And then
interesting.
he immediately segues into, well, I wanted to ask him something about, international affairs, and he's really smart about that stuff. But yeah, that I only went there one time, all not true. The story that you've heard that he was being coached to save Jeffrey Epstein for 60 Minutes interview to help him prepare, that was eventually the story that we got as employees.
Oh,
But it's not the only story because later Steve talked about going to Italy to do a kind of Reservoir Dogs in a warehouse shoot. It's going to be all gray, folding chairs, just me and Epstein. So the amount that he's released, this 2 hours or hour and
right.
54 minutes, which I think is early on because that's in Epstein's house. My understanding, the other filming was done in Europe. So
Okay.
So there's at least 15 hours of more tape. And if I had to guess, you have to remember at this time, Trump basically viscerally hated Donald Trump, even though
Steve. Donald Trump
Steve
hated.
did. Yeah, Bannon
Yeah.
hated Trump because he'd been let go from the White House and
He
was
and Gorka were
therefore,
let go simultaneously, it seemed like.
well, it seemed like there was more to Steve's being let go than just allowing Michael Wolfin to interview everybody. There were some other
Right.
incidences. But I think that was the final straw. And so Steve went between wanting to be in Trump's inner circle and hating Trump for kicking him out of his inner circle.
Hmm.
So I have to imagine that a lot of that extra footage that has not been released was because it's Steve and Epstein talking smack about President Trump at the time. Because Steve would talk smack about the president in private
We saw it.
24/7 during that period of time. He was always sort of, love and hate, right?
Was he
He's
doing
such a
that on the
moron.
War
If
Room set?
only I were there, kind of thing.
Was he doing that on the War Room set when you were there? Part of the posse?
Oh, listen, I mean, I would say every single guest on War Room had Steve talk crap about them when the microphones were turned off during the ad portion. Every single one, from Rudy Giuliani on down, that was Steve's moment to tell us what a moron our guest was. Um, what's interesting to me about the Epstein thing is I know Steve and I know his love of money. If Steve could have made a buck out of this Epstein tape, he would have done it. I think he got trapped in the idea of I'm being sucked back into the Trump administration in 19 and 20, and then he needs his pardon, right?
Right.
And Trump gave it to him. Remember, Trump pardoned Steve Bannon for We
Yep.
Build the Wall, and he let Brian Kolfage and Andy Badalato and another guy named Ward, I believe, who I never met. And early on, I refused to work on We Build the Wall because of the association of Andy Badalato, and people can do their own research on him. It's not really that savory, and he's Steve's bestie. So
Mm.
Andy Badalato brought We Build the Wall to Steve. We've got this rube down in Florida. He's raised 20 million bucks. We got to get him in here because we got to get our hands on that money, essentially was the story. And they did. And they set up a legal structure. I mean, there's a very prominent female lawyer in DC who was behind all that, whose name never appeared in anything.
Who was that?
Uh, I'm trying to remember her name. It'll come to me, but she's not really the tip of the spear, but it's indicative of how Washington works. Do you
Sure.
understand?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Um, Steve, in the We Build the Wall thing, remember, I felt like I was doing really good reporting on the corona outbreak. I mean, that was my
Mhm.
ballywick. That's the reason that we started the show, because I uncovered it in December of 2019. And knowing China, if there's a SARS outbreak, it would be like announcing a leprosy outbreak in Christ's Jerusalem. People were going to lose their minds because the mortality rate on the first one was so thick. So long before even Wuhan, I have a binder that's like 4 or 5 inches thick with all of the best medical papers of the time, including a 2007 paper on ivermectin, a 2004 paper on hydroxychloroquine. Peter Navarro and I went to, or Stephen Hatfield and I sat down with Peter Navarro, I believe the night after Wuhan. I handed them everything, including
Mhm.
the issues that they were going to have with PPEs. And the reason I'm being kind of circuitous here is by the spring of 20, Bannon's group at We Build the Wall was calling me up to try and hook them up with PPE manufacturers and PPE distributors, all of whom I'd already spoken to before Wuhan and had made friends with the guy who was the only manufacturer of N95s in America. Wonderful guy.
Mhm.
And they were trying to use that money to buy PPEs to sell to local hospitals to war profiteer off of that money. And they were staying in five-star hotels. They were, leasing planes that they didn't need to lease. I mean, this was an awful charity, if we could call it that. Brian Colfage was, in my opinion, the big victim here, the
Mm.
kind of naive guy who didn't really know what he was getting himself into, but once he got into it, didn't know how to get himself out of it. And when I finally quit, it was almost a year later, I guess, in the fall, I get Hunter Biden's laptop. After the election fails, Steve tells me if I mention Hunter Biden's laptop or the FBI, he's going to fire me, which is kind of a joke because he ends up never paying me anyway. So how he could fire me was sort of strange. Um, and he tries to keep me and another employee out of the studio for like the first 2 or 3 weeks of December on the spurious idea that we had been exposed to COVID, and his life was so important that we couldn't possibly expose him. So we're kind of shut out. It comes to Christmas time, and I get a phone call I think was on either Christmas night or the night after Christmas from Miles Guo. And I had walked away from the We Build the Wall stuff,
Mhm.
I've been away from We Build the Wall, and I had walked away from the new federal state of China stuff in June or July of the prior year because I had the Hong Kong grandfather with me. I had a Uyghur family I invited from DC with me. And Miles Guo's people came up and said, all these people are communists. You cannot have them. So I was like, okay, I'm leaving too, bye bye. Took off the microphones, kept my mouth shut. I warned Steve that that thing was a scam, and it was a scam. And what's so interesting to me about all of this, when it gets right down to it, late December, we're trying to bring on Professor Ludwig of Georgetown University. Wonderful guy. I mean, you got to love a guy who's got a life-size statue of Klaus von Stauffenberg in his front yard in suburban Maryland. He's squared away, right?
Who is that
So he
guy? I don't know who
says
this.
Klaus von Stauffenberg was the guy who tried to blow up Hitler with the bomb under the desk
Okay.
in
Okay.
Poland. So Ludwig, we call him up, and he'd been a guest multiple times, and he had been Steve's professor at Georgetown, so they had a relationship.
Okay.
Now, this is probably the last 10 days of December. Ludwig says, look, you guys can ask, or I can ask, but I cannot appear on his show if any of the stuff concerning We Build the Wall is true. And at this point, I haven't even read the indictment because I'm just like, hey, I want to do my job. If he's promising us it's all squared away, who am I to judge, right? You know, there's still
Right.
things that I would like to get out if I can. Well, it becomes clear and it really becomes clear that everything is sideways, I guess, on January 6th. We're sitting in the studio after the thing. Steve's like, I hope they burn it all down. Another employee is like, well, why would you want that, Steve? Because he's like, well, we needed a dictator in this country. You know, this democracy's not working. We're like, whoa. You know, and he's like, who would that dictator be? And he kind of laughs, and the other employee goes, you. And then he starts to have a real belly laugh. And then you're realizing, like, wow, this is just a sick, sick person. And a week later, I guess it is, I start realizing that he's begging for a pardon. And on a Friday evening, I look up Brian Colfax to see what's going on with him, and somebody interviews him. Maybe it was that Saturday, the 15th of January in Florida, and says, hey, are you going to get a pardon? Is anybody talking to you? He's like, no, man, nobody's talking to me. And I realized, like, what kind of people are these? A triple amputee veteran with two small children and a wife is
Right.
not going to get a pardon, but you guys are discussing giving Stephen Bannon one, and he was the architect of the whole thing. I immediately read the indictment. It's 100% correct. I don't know why nobody ever interviewed me about We Build the Wall. I could have taken them down for far worse. I don't know why anybody never interviewed me about Miles Guo ever. And I
You're talking
spent
about from the DOJ.
from the DOJ, from the FBI, but they interviewed other people. They interviewed like his PR agent, right? I don't know
The
any other
friendlies. What you're
employees
saying is
who,
they interviewed friendlies, not people
oh,
that
100% friendlies who would be 100%, I'm sorry, I can't recall about everything. In fact, where Miles Guo was concerned, the FBI never even interviewed the six retired U.S. New York City police detectives who ran his 24/7 detail. Never. And I heard
interesting.
stories about Miles having safes filled with cash. Some of the cash was Chinese military cash that could only be used inside the Chinese military industrial complex. But none of these guys ever got interviewed. But little ladies from Guatemala, you know, folding towels in the basement of the Sherry Netherlands sure got interviewed by the FBI, but not me. I mean, that was true about the laptop and every other thing that I was involved in. I guess they don't want truth tellers to ever go under oath. But
No, that's not my, that I would agree. That's not my experience considering everything that we've witnessed now in the past 10 years. And if, for me up close and personal, prior to that, I was sort of a spectator, but now it's too personal. So
so
go ahead.
so Monday morning, it's the 17th of January. I wrote it the night before, but I hit enter like at 6 a.m. on Monday morning, resigned, right? There's no way I'm going to sit next to some guy who's got a pardon when a triple amputee veteran is going to jail for 48 months. My credo will not allow that. And now that I know he's fully guilty and the nonsense of these charges mean nothing, and I added all that up with Miles Guo, and I mean, Miles Guo bought him a house in Connecticut. Did that ever get clawed back, for the victims of Miles Guo's fraud? I don't know. No one ever asked me. He had another benefactor named Mustafa El Gindi, who is a Egyptian billionaire. That guy paid his rent, I presume, on the house in D.C. Water, electricity, internet, the whole nine yards, all came in his name, and all were paid in his name. The
Hmm.
only interaction I ever had with Gindi was Steve one night asked me, listen, I want to devote an hour of the show to these dams being built on the Upper Nile by the Ethiopians and the Eritreans, etc. So I'm a quick study. I said, sure, okay, I can talk about that. I spent 2 hours reading up on it. I'm ready to go the next morning. And uh, about 2 hours after the show, I get a phone call from Steve, like, how could you screw things up so much? Like, what are you talking about? You ruined everything. I'm like, what are you talking about? said about the dams on the Nile. Apparently, I didn't take the Egyptian point of view, which was his benefactor's point of view, which
Oh,
was the reason why he asked me to do the spot on the thing. But it just shows you this guy's owned by foreign interests, pretends that he's Mr. America. He literally robbed little old ladies of their money for We Build the Wall, and he was forced to plead guilty to that offense in New York State under the attorney general there. And
mm-hmm.
that all came about 4 days after, through an attorney. I called them up and I was like, I know nobody even wants to interview me, but I've got a laptop and a cell phone, and I'd be happy to come in and testify for the prosecution that this guy's 100% dirty, right? Well, Steve pleads guilty in between those communications and the next 3 days. And I get a call through my attorney like, hey, man, you were the magic ticket, well done. I don't know
So
what
look,
happened.
so I'm gonna let me just drill down a little bit on this, on when things really finally fell apart between you and the War Room and Steve. Was it after the Hunter Biden laptop from hell, um, or was it after the We Build the Wall? When did things really?
It started falling apart really with Miles Guo because I had played no part in the We Build the Wall. I didn't want to know. Do you know that
Right.
kind of thing where you're just like, the
Hmm.
more I know, the more problems I have. But their written requests for me to get them PPEs, I told Steve's partner, Andy Battalato, in writing, this is likely illegal, 100% immoral, with the country on its knees for you guys to try and profit off this. We'll give you 25% of everything, Jack. I mean, the same thing happened with Miles Guo that Christmas, that phone call. He called me up and he offered me $100 million if I would just get back on board and start waving the flag for the new federal state of China. And I have a witness to this. And I know for a fact that Guo was under a FISA warrant. And I got to imagine I'm under a FISA warrant somewhere. So that phone call was being listened to. So you begin to wonder, were like Steve and his boys trying to set me up? Or was this just Miles Guo really wanting to give me $100 million? Uh, that whole Guo thing was a huge embarrassment for U.S. intelligence. Obviously, I believe Guo was playing a double against US FBI counterintelligence. I think Bannon was in the middle of it because he's just a slippery guy. If I had to guess, I think Bannon's been an FBI confidential informant for a long time. I would say the same thing about Donald Trump, too. And I think it's one of the reasons Trump got to slide on so many things that he got to slide on in the 90s. And I think it's one of the reasons why Bannon has been able to slide on so many things that have put other people in the dirt. For example, Guo.
Okay, because Guo is sitting in prison right now. I think he's in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah, but they haven't had a sentencing hearing for him. He's been there for, he's been guilty for what, 11 months, and they still haven't had a sentencing hearing, or more, 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't
And he's
make any sense unless there's some embarrassing information that's going to come out that the feds don't want
and
anyone
there's
to know about.
well, and there's also a considerable amount of investment money that I know people that invested in what Guo is doing, and their money is gone or effectively tied up or unavailable or whatever you want to call it.
Well, worse, what I would say is that Miles Guo was desperate to get back in the good graces of the Chinese. Somebody sent me a video in, I think, early 21 of Miles Guo talking Mandarin to his own people. And in it, he describes how he controls the Committee on the Foreign Danger, China, because of
Hmm.
Steve Bannon, and he pays all their bills. He describes Steve using a slang word that makes Steve his bottom in Mandarin. That got a lot of laughs.
Oh boy.
And you begin to wonder who was playing who here. And if I had to guess, I think Guo captured perhaps well over 1 million, 2 million contacts of overseas Chinese diaspora who were, by simply giving them their email addresses and telephone numbers, etc., have exposed themselves as traitors to the CCP. And I would bet every dollar I have that Miles Guo sent all of that to China too. And I
So
think
he
this
was
is, yeah. Sorry.
He was really a double agent, is what you're saying, working for the CCP while pretending to be working against them. And you believe, and what you're asserting here is that Bannon was working with him in favor of the CCP while
I think
presenting the
Bannon
fact that,
was
yeah,
working for him in favor of Steve Bannon, which I think is what
okay,
Steve Bannon does in every decision in life that he makes. But I do think that Steve had some connection to the intelligence services and was pushing information when it benefited him, likely. I do know that nobody gave Steve a heads up in early 2018, I guess it was, or early 2019. Must have been 2019 when Miles Guo's offices were raided by an FBI forensic team that flew in from Tucson, Arizona. One of the uh, security guards gave Steve the heads up on that. And so Steve didn't show up in the middle of this FBI raid that was not very well publicized, but was more than a year before Guo got taken down. And as I say, nobody that I'm aware of on Guo's New York City Police Department security detail ever got questioned by the FBI, not a single time.
yeah, that's wild. That's absolutely wild. Roger Stone shares similar opinions. Do you talk to Roger with respect to
I
your?
don't talk to Roger. I've met him dozens of times, but we're not, I don't have his phone number. Maybe he has mine. He can call me if he likes. Like I said, I never don't tell the truth. So if, a kind of proof of that is notice all my data sets that were given for the 2020 election. Nobody ever disputed any of them because they were all able to be remanufactured with the same data and the same algorithms. Nobody ever came after me for anything I said about Hunter or his family, CIA, everybody. I've called them all out. I mean, I discovered those bio labs because of Hunter's laptop. And we
Mhm.
find out that the same people running those bio labs for CIA through Metabiota, which ends up being bought by Incutel, giving the early investors, the early insiders that Hunter was supposed to sell it to, a 5X, a promised 5X, which they get because CIA's venture capital arm buys it later. Well, the same doctors who were running those biolabs in Ukraine were the same doctors appearing on Corona papers with Chinese doctors years before the Corona outbreak. And we're inside the Wuhan lab. And I might also add that US intelligence and Fauci and all these guys get connected with a guy named George Gao, who's the head of the Chinese CDC, not because, they just have this fantastic intellectual relationship. No, because his wife, a woman named Xiaoying Zheng, is the Biden family handler for the CCP. Joe Biden stayed at the Zheng family compound in Shanghai in 1989, and she's been there to greet every single one of them ever since. She is like part of the family, and this is how Chinese intelligence is able to be so much more successful than ours because she's been there since 1989. What
Right.
it'll be 40 years and 3 years that's been her job. And
Yeah,
she's married to George Gao, the head of the Chinese CDC. That's how the relationship started. Wasn't
so we
some random meeting in Sierra Leone.
So we see this relationship throughout Congress, right? What's her face had Congresswoman, or sorry, Dianne Feinstein had the Chinese driver for what, 20 years?
Yeah.
Fang Fang and Swalwell. Biden's had obviously their handlers. Do you think Steve? I mean, if you're asserting that Steve is some sort of a criminal informant, FBI informant, something. Do you believe he had some sort of a Chinese handler in some fashion besides his
Well,
relationship with Guo?
he had Miles Guo, right?
Right,
And he was taking money from Miles Guo, and it turns out that Miles Guo's not a good person.
right.
So, do the math. He was taking significant amounts of cash from Miles Guo, and you watch some of these Epstein interview snippets that we're seeing from Steve and he through text messages. He said, "I'm no longer Christian Zionist. I'm 100% Zionist now." got to remember the person who was paying Steve's biggest advertiser for the first half of War Room Pandemic was Larry Ellison.
Oracle.
I
There you
mean,
go. That's a Zionist for you.
this is like the old coloring books at Howard Johnson's. Connect the dots, and you will get a picture, kids. I mean, it's the fact that all this stuff is being kept from us, and this nonsense that now the Justice Department, with everything going on, is going to try and get Steve Bannon's contempt of Congress erased from his record, right? Why? What is the purpose of that? Why are they not going to rescue Peter Navarro? People have to start asking these simple questions, and
Right.
you will get to some dark answers.
Well, again, when you compare what happens to people who are really trying to tell the truth and or were trying to stand up to the government coup d'état on November 2020, a la J6, you saw due process violations, habeas corpus suspension. Obviously they put people in jail. Steve apparently went to jail for a few months up in Connecticut in the middle of the summer. I do have to say he came out with a really nice suntan, but
Well, here's what I find so appalling about MAGA and this cult of personality, and oh, Steve Bannon did his time. He's so brave. I remind everybody that Martha Stewart did twice the amount of time in the same facility, and I never heard her whine a single time,
that's
right?
true. That's
But
true.
somehow a fat guy in a combat jacket gets everybody's empathy up, and I don't understand why. It makes no sense to me. But we've watched these things go on now for years and years. I mean, I could tell your audience something about the 2020 election. I just found out that I tried desperately to get copies of the laptop to the director of national intelligence through back doors in November, December of 2020. I
Ratcliffe.
ultimately gave it to Garrett Ziegler, who didn't give it to him. He kept it. He and General Flynn, I guess, decided to play some like, faux game about like there's nothing on the laptop. But my understanding from an intelligence friend just about 3 weeks ago is that the laptop actually got to Ratcliffe's office and laid on his desk, and he told me, "Get that thing out of here. I want nothing to do with it." Trump was still president, and this mirrored my experience in February of 2021 when I got back to Palm Beach and I contacted Trump's then chief of staff. And over a 3-day period with conversations back and forth about the laptop, the final word was Trump wants less than zero to do with Hunter Biden's laptop. Why is that?
Oh.
I can tell you why, because Hunter was taken down by a Mossad team hard in October of 2018. I have all their photographs. I have photographs of one of their passports.
How do you have all
And
this?
because I figured it out. And if I can figure it out, why can't they figure it out? The way I figured it out was I was told in February that Mossad was shopping portions of Hunter's laptop to Sean Hannity at Fox News by someone at Fox News. And I'm thinking at the time, like, look, who doesn't have Hunter's laptop at this point? He's
I
on
had it. Ziegler gave
drug,
it to me.
right?
Ziegler
He's on,
gave it to me. Yeah.
gave it to you much later than he was supposed to give it to DNI on the 27th. Why did, any intelligence service worth their salt could have gotten their hands on Hunter's laptops because he was in a cocaine daze no matter what geography he was in on planet Earth? Well, this woman, Anna, she's all through the laptop. She's the woman who's there holding the ponytail, which Daily
Mhm.
Mail ran clean, and then ever since the face has been blurred out. She and her 3 Russian cousins came to visit Hunter for the weekend of October 1, 2, 2, and 3 of 2018. Drugged him. When he wakes up from being overdosed, he's like, "Man, I've never overdosed before." And you're like, "Yeah, you didn't overdose this time either, Hunter." The entire house is clean. 2 laptops are stolen. 2 cell phones are stolen. And an iPad is stolen. Unfortunately for them, some of the hijinks over the weekend were going up to the cloud from Hunter's phone camera, I believe. And to prove that this is true, I was in Puerto Rico on February 14th of 22 and got sat down in a chair by two Israeli intelligence agents who wanted to have a discussion about what I'd found on Hunter's laptop concerning their agents. And maybe it might be good for your health not to talk about this going forward. And
No
what's even
kidding.
sicker, there were two Puerto Rican locals who were at the table running cover for these guys, which is the way it works everywhere in the United States and everywhere on planet Earth with Israeli intelligence. And they start freaking out because they realize we're talking about the president of the United States and his son. I mean, all this is real, and this was happening at a time when I was being heavily surveilled by the FBI. So likely they had eyes on the meeting.
So I want to just go back, rewind the tape a little bit. You mentioned something about how the laptop had been handed off to Garrett Ziegler and to General Flynn, and they played patty cake or whatever. I'll tell you this, Garrett Ziegler, I think it was mid-December, I was in DC, and he gave me a copy of the laptop in December of 2020. That's when I got it.
Okay, he
But
came to
I
me
didn't,
on December 27th seeking a copy. I gave it to him. The one that you might have gotten was a thumb drive that was
yes,
floating around earlier with all kinds of documents. I gave out
right.
120 copies of that the
Okay,
night of
I
the election.
just for the record, I didn't really know Garrett Ziegler, and I didn't know why he approached me. I later found out why. He was connected because he was being funded by Patrick Byrne, and then they put that big book out, and I have a copy of it, the one that had, it looks like a porn manual,
But
frankly, because
right, but
so
it doesn't show you the biolabs. It doesn't make the
no,
connection between the metabiota and Incutel and CIA. It doesn't talk about the fact that Kofor Black, who ran the Bin Laden task force pre 9/11, also sits on the board of Burisma, still sits on the board of Burisma. Why isn't this guy called in? In fact, after 9/11, we got to get Kofor out of the way so quickly that George Bush turns him into the ambassador for weapons of mass destruction. And he goes to the State Department, I guess, to double dip on his pension. But he's never been called in. Why not? I mean, if Comer and Jordan wanted answers, why wouldn't you call the ambassador, who also sits on the board of Burisma? You could clear it all up in a couple of the friendly questions, right? No, never.
but that's the theme in DC, Jack, isn't it not? I mean, are we getting anybody called in? Hillary, if they do get called in, it's a dog and pony show. Somebody bangs the gavel, and then there's no referrals anywhere. DOJ doesn't do anything, and if they do make referrals, they look the other way. They don't do anything.
Think about this.
It's a circle jerk of not getting nothing done, and we the people pay the price.
The copies that both the Senate Judiciary Committee and Jordan and Comer had came from me. Their copy came via Matt Getz after I called him from Switzerland in March of 22 and was like, I can't protect you anymore. I know you've been sitting on this thing for a long time. You got to do something now. It's go time. And he does the next morning, to his credit. And you watch how they destroyed Matt over the last 2 or 3 years. You watch how they've destroyed Marjorie Taylor Greene. Again, the only individual from Congress who ever called me up directly offering her help. The only other people that I've gone to with some of this stuff was Rand Paul, and I went to him with a U.S. intelligence asset who was our guy in China for 11 years. And we had a sit down with his attorneys concerning those biolabs and the connection to China and the connection to George Gao through the Biden family's connection to his wife, Xiaoying Zhang. But the problem is, I mean, even the brave start to lose their courage once they realize that they're up against Mossad and CIA, and that it's far dirtier than anyone imagines. I mean, let's again just put on our small, like third grade thinking caps. If China released this from a lab by accident or otherwise, why is there not a global tort against China so that the rest of the world can recover all the lost earnings from their violative action in violation of treaties, et cetera, et cetera? Why isn't there one? You know why there isn't one? Because we were in the lab too. And we were sharing some of our most high technology in terms of splicing that we could. And CIA was at the heart of it. And the reason that they were there is also an indictment of them, because in 2011, they lost every agent in China because characteristically, My understanding is they handed everybody the same communications device. So once they got one, they got everybody. Now we're entirely blind inside China. We perceive that, hey, if we can get inside this Wuhan lab and get together with some of their virologists, we might have an insight into some of what they're up to. And then
Right.
when we got there, we were like, you mean we can do every illegal experiment we've ever dreamed of, and there's nobody at University of North Carolina or Wisconsin who's going to get in trouble? Because this is China. That's what they did. And the whole world got sick and lost $25 trillion and untold lives and fortunes and every other thing because of it. But that's why we're not doing anything.
So bring this back to War Room Pandemic, because when that show came out, it was all the rage. As I said in my open, I watched it pretty much regularly to see what was breaking that I wasn't able to find or keep up with on X or get from sources. I mean, you guys were slaying it back then,
Well,
right?
I think that we were, but I think that there were certain things that, like, for example, you will remember I was always against shutting down the country. I was always against shutting
Right.
down schools. I
Yep.
was always for the essentially the Swedish model, which turned out to be the right model. I mean,
It was. It
we
was
had
brilliant.
we had the highest mortality rate on planet Earth.
That's
How
right.
is that a victory?
It's
And
not.
we lost trillions of dollars in economic opportunity and debt and every other thing. I mean, to give you your viewers an example of just how cavalierly the Trump administration makes decisions, I'm sitting one day, it's right about the time that we're 2 weeks to smash the curve, right? They
Right.
hadn't come up with a catchy phrase like smash the curve. It was 2 weeks to flatten the curve, 2 weeks to reduce hospital admissions, 2 weeks this, that, normal, thoughtful things. And my problem with it always was with a respiratory virus. It's not really certain that 2 weeks is going to be enough, right? Or that it's
Right.
even going to be effective. So still better to put all of your eggs in the baskets that are likely to get broken, put all your foam in there. Let
Right.
everybody else ride it out, get natural immunity, and go from there. Well, we're sitting one day, and Jason Miller, not the Miller of today, but the one of the previous administration,
Right.
is sitting with Steve, and they're talking about how we got to shut down the country. And I'm going, hey guys, it makes no sense. It's a hyperbolic curve, the same area underneath either way. Did you guys pass trigonometry? Like, what's going on here? And they're coming up with catchy phrases for the president. Kick the curve in the nose, punch the curve, stomp on the curve. And Jason Miller goes, smash the curve. Steve goes, I love it. You got to call the president right now. Calls up the president right in front of me. I can hear the whole conversation. And he's like, I love it. It's so catchy. It's so fantastic. Smash the curve. So that's what we did. That's how we lost another like $12 trillion because 2 weeks to smash the curve turned into 18 months to totally destroy the American economy
That's
and
right.
ruin everything that was good about us.
Yeah.
And it's like what we're watching right now with Iran, right? I mean, nobody thought this through.
So, so actually, since you brought that up, what are your thoughts? Because we saw how we handled Venezuela. We went in there, grabbed Maduro. Nobody died on our side anyway. We had a lot of people down there were like, never seen this technology before. Was that a trial run for what we're doing in Iran? Are we? I mean, today the UK is flying
Well,
their fighter
let,
jets down towards the Middle East. What are we doing? I mean, why are we? If we're there, are we not pulling the trigger? We have an aircraft carrier that's full of shit, literally flooding right now, and they're having to take it back towards Cyprus, I guess, for some repairs. I don't know how long that's going to take that apparatus
it,
offline, but what are we doing?
it, uh,
I
I
thought we got
think
rid of
we're
the
doing
nuclear
like kabuki
stuff.
theater for the last throes of empire. The entire
For who?
surface
The
navy.
UK? For America? For who? Who is this for?
Well, listen, UK and Europe are on our teat, so they have to follow along with our plans, or they watch the EU collapse in a summer. And I think that there are smarter minds now, perhaps saying, listen, this Iran foray is not going to work. Remember, it's 4 times the size of Iran. It's
Right.
got 95 million people in it. It's a highly mountainous country. You're not landing with the Marines and marching to Tehran anytime soon. And they have hypersonic missiles, and they have tens of thousands of drones and lesser missiles that can overwhelm the anti-missile capacity of our greatest ship and our greatest ally. And
Hmm.
that's why it would be a disaster. And the biggest joke is you have all these Israel first people talking like they want to go, they want to go. But my understanding is it was Netanyahu who told them not to go in January. And it's my understanding that Netanyahu's military staff are telling him, you can't go now. Remember, the Iranian missiles hit all their targets in downtown Tel Aviv. I mean, they
Right.
hit an underground command and control center right in the center of the city, nailed it. So if they do that times like 100, how does Israel function as a functioning economy? You have no oil storage capacity. All your ports are shot. All of your cities are shot. All of your desalination plants, electrical plants, everything's been hammered. And I think the one fear that may motivate Trump, and I think was the same thing that motivated him last summer, was either you go or we send nukes, which I think would be a great tragedy if the Israelis did that. I think it'd be a great tragedy for planet Earth and a great
I
tragedy
agree.
for the Jewish people.
I agree.
But
I agree.
and we can't even talk about them owning nukes because we pretend they don't own nukes. Because if
No,
we
they
acknowledge
have
that they
nukes.
had nukes, we couldn't give them military aid under 60-year-old non-proliferation treaties. It's as if
So,
the entire relationship is built upon lies.
well, okay, because there's just so much conflicting information. Susan, are you familiar with Susan Kokenda?
No, but that doesn't mean anything. I'm
Okay.
literally not.
I'm trying to think of the report she does. I probably have it in an email. Oh, Promethean Action. Promethean Action. She's always talking about the British, City of London, the bankers. Trump is playing the long game to destabilize the financial, the 100-year-old financial institution and, basically build from the ground up, which is genius, clarity, all of this stuff, right? Getting us into a digital world, which I'm not in favor of. I'm not in favor of any of this, Palantir prison, as we call it. I don't believe in any of it. I'm not a crypto person, not for lack of understanding, just because I don't trust any of it. I trust physical assets that we can touch and hold. And if you want to attach them and tokenize them and even put it onto some sort of a legal ledger where you can actually have the financial digital title to it, then okay. But right now, the way things go, crypto is just another fiat. It's just like the dollar, except with Bitcoin, it's having itself and it's becoming more scarce, unlike the dollar, which is going the other direction. So, that all being said, the hypothesis is Trump is actually playing sort of a double agent game. And we know that Israel is sort of the bully pulpit, and they use the anti Semitic card to drag the United States military into their wars that are really to shore up the lack of collateral in the city of London. They're bankrupt. So, I mean, Susan Kokenda pushes this out all the time. I'm not saying she's right or wrong. I'm saying that's a narrative that I understand. It's trade routes and money and resources,
I, I
and
don't
Trump
perhaps
not
disagree.
bombing Iran is sort of exposed where their assets were and what they were going to do by making us think we were going to do it. I mean, is that a theory you subscribe to? And how does that jar with what the war room is pushing and where you stand on all of that?
Well, to be honest with you, I haven't even watched 1 minute of the War Room since I walked away on the morning of January 17 when President Trump was still president the last time.
Right.
So I don't know what their thinking is. I will tell you that Steve is not a deep thinker. Steve is a parrot of other people's good ideas. I've never seen him read a newspaper ever, unless it was like, Steve, there's an article about you. And then what page? All those papers and books he has stacked up in front of them, they're all like Orson Welles trying to make himself look like he's intelligent. He doesn't read anything. He watches
Hmm.
old movies, in fact. He sits in his library and watches Turner Classic Movies and dreams about becoming Orson Welles. He's not followed his dream by any stretch. He wishes he were Harvey Weinstein without the problems. So,
Oof.
what Steve is thinking, and then I look at Trump and you say, well, could it be that Trump is playing 6D chess? All I've ever seen is like tiddlywinks, and the kids always win. I don't see any deep thinking on the part of Trump. And if it were to save the city of London, that may, I guess, explain why nothing's been done with the Epstein stuff, because the Rothschild family's all over it. And who other than them are the city of London?
Mm-hmm.
And he was getting paid, what, $20 million a year as a retainer all the way up until he died from these people. So if I had to guess, I would guess that you're going to see a dollar collapse. We're down 20% against basket of other currencies last year.
Right.
Gold's pushing $5,000. I think you're going to see a big repricing that puts the boot squarely in the chest of the American little guy again. And I think that's what's happening. And I think Trump's trying to manage this decline. I also find that it's despicable that the president's sons would start a cryptocurrency and take $500 million from the Qataris to anchor it, when essentially they're betting against the US dollar. And now we find out that Lutnick was betting against Trump's tariffs, even though he was helping Trump write those tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as I can tell, Trump is just a completely captured guy. And I'll tell you one more story that I think is very pertinent when you consider what's happened over the last year. I was invited to Cannes, France last December. I think I got there on like the 15th, and I believe I left in the middle of the night on the 17th. Okay. Uh, I'm invited because this guy has all this compromise. He's got all this information on famous people from Bill Gates on down, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, I'm not going to fly to France. But this woman's a billionaire. She says, how about if I send you a ticket? I said, okay. Flew from Mexico City. I was tailed the moment I got to the counter in Mexico City. I arrive in Paris, connection to Nice, get picked up by a Maybach, and get carried to the Con Carlton, which is owned by the Emir of Qatar. I am led up to the Emir of Qatar's residence on the top floor. I go in there. There's 5 or 6 people there from Mar-a-Lago. There's a guy who's the lawyer for Epic Times. There's Catherine Austin Fitz. And all these people have been there for a couple days. And we are told straight up that they paid $960 million for a videotape of Trump with an underage girl in the early 2000s. And they have the girl, now woman, too. The
Did you
guy who's
speak with
telling
her?
me, pardon me?
Did you speak with her?
No, I didn't speak with her. I didn't see the video, but what I'm saying is all of this is being told to us in the Emir of Qatar's home. I don't think people get to just
Talk's
go in
cheap,
there
isn't
and,
it?
and talk
It's-
baloney, right?
well, I
They
don't know.
also,
Talk's cheap. It depends on who they're trying to influence. That sounds like a
well,
very
well,
influential crowd there.
3 weeks later, Donald Trump takes his first state trip to where? Qatar, gets a 747, and his kids get a $500 million investment in their BS crypto account. So you tell me if it's baloney. And you tell me why Bill Ackman and all these guys who try to point the finger at Qatar as the evil empire, why they haven't asked Harvard to give Qatar's money back. Why has nobody investigated the fact that it was Qatar that was funding Hamas at Bibi Netanyahu's monthly
Right.
request, I might
Right.
add,
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
So, as far as I'm concerned, Qatar is like the little brother of Israel, and this pretense that they are something different is absolute nonsense. And I believe that this meeting in France, and as I said, I left the next night at dinner time because I was not going to participate in blackmailing of a president, even a president I don't like, because I care about my country. I immediately pushed the story up to the relevant authorities. Again, never a phone call from the FBI, never a call back from any of the
Why
agencies,
do you think you keep getting
nothing.
invited to these situations, these sit downs, these meetings, if you're constantly blowing the whistle and nobody's
I
doing
think
anything
that
about
these
it?
people had this meeting because they wanted it to get back to Trump. I
Okay.
think that this meeting was held so that Trump would be told post haste, This is why there were all these like Christian Zionists from the club there putting their hands on each other or the whole time I was there. And the guy who's saying this, Philippe Aguilar, he said, my inclination is to reveal it before the inauguration. There goes my hand. See it? Can the audience see it?
Yeah.
He asked 3 times. Every time my hand went up, every other person in the room's hand did not go up. Oh, we can forgive the president this. Oh. And listen, France is an ally. You got a billionaire of yours who's threatening compromise against the president of the United States. How come you haven't arrested him? And the other things that he said was, for example, I said, how'd you start your career? Because the first night I spent the whole night sitting next to this guy talking to him. I'm sure I had more one-on-one conversation with this guy than all the rest of the people in the room combined because
Mm-hmm.
they all went to bed. And he told me, oh, yeah, I got my start opening the largest gay nightclub in Europe, 1.5 miles from NATO headquarters in the mid 80s.
At least he had a repeat business very close by.
Well, he was very clear about, some of the ways in which he makes money. He also told me he was an advisor to the president for life of Djibouti. He told me that after the first meetings with Halliburton and the State Department, right after 9/11, because we were going to go use Djibouti as a launch pad, the
Mm-hmm.
president asked him, what should I do? He said, what you need to do is you need to videotape and record every single one of these meetings, every single one. He's like, I've got terabytes of that stuff. You don't think Halliburton and all these clowns were cutting sleazy deals in Djibouti and talking out of school the whole time? They were. It's why, Hunter ends up at Burisma because Uncle Cofer Black from CIA's already there, setting a place for him at the table. And yet Comer and Jordan never call these people in. I even said when I left this guy's apartment, we were having dinner, and I stood up in dinner because it was getting too crazy town. He wanted to use the information to help Trump make him the next president of France. This
Mm-hmm.
was his objective. So if that was his objective, you would think even the French would be interested, but
Sure.
nobody's interested. Nobody's interested, but the president did get a 747. Sons did get $500 million, and it was his first state trip, which I think would have not been on anybody's top 50 list before he decided to
Juxtapose
go to
that first
Qatar.
day trip with the first day trip he did in Trump term 1. He went to Saudi Arabia first.
Money, baby. I
Saudis don't
look
want
at
us
people.
flying over their airspace right now if we decide to go and bomb Iran or get into some skirmish with them. How do you square that?
Well, because the Saudis are being rational. Their own street hates Israel vehemently,
Mhm.
viciously. And all the money from the royal family can't buy enough flatbread in the ghettos of Saudi Arabia to change that. And if they look as if they are quislings with us against another Arab state, I don't think the family survives. In fact, the grand um, I don't know what his name would be, but the grand priest at Mecca just a month and a half ago said, you know, the fight for Palestine is a fight for all of Islam. And that message was as much for the Saudi royal family as it was for anyone else. And look at some of these states. Bahrain is led by a Sunni minority. The country's 80% Shia. Most Americans don't realize that. You've got Qatar, there's 400,000 Qataris and 2 million foreigners living there as slave labor. Same thing would be true of UAE. And nobody can explain to me this sort of détente that's occurred between Yemen and Saudi Arabia if there aren't some plans in the works. And anybody in between, I think, should be thinking a little bit more carefully. That would be UAE and Qatar.
You don't think
Because
anything
this,
you don't think the Abraham Accords had anything to do with this, or do you think this is more BRICS centric?
listen, the Abraham Accords were window dressing in the hopes that Donald Trump could pretend he's some sort of peacemaker and everybody loves Israel. This is just not true. And UAE were the sponsors of the Abraham Accords. And if hypersonic missiles start flying through the Gulf, I certainly would not want to be in one of those glass towers in Dubai. And I certainly wouldn't want to be part of the Dubai ruling class when the lights go out and their 2 million slaves decide it's payback time. This whole thing is built on like a fragile pile of broken glasses. And to think that it's not is crazy.
So
But we have a 4D chess master as the president, so who knows what rational thoughts have just been thrown by the wayside in every arena. I don't see this working out well at all. In fact, there's a reason that the American fleet is hiding behind the mountains of Oman to stay out of the strike zone from the Iranian hypersonic missiles. But that also means that their Pershing missiles, or their not Pershing, what's the name of them? The our go-to missile since the mid 80s,
Patriot.
which Patriot, not Patriot, the ground hugging, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Those only
I
have a
don't know.
range of 1,200 miles. So,
Right.
we're hitting the beaches of Iran from the standoff position that we're in. And last June, much as everybody wants to talk about this great strike, the only aircraft that flew in Iranian airspace were those two B-2s. And I'm going to tell you, they're vulnerable this time. Their stealth is not the same as it was the first time, because even without the addition of newer Chinese and Russian air defense systems, they're going to be analyzing every single bit of data concerning that flight. And they're going to be able to see anomalies that will let them see it a second time. And we keep making these errors over and over and over again. And I really don't understand it. And it seems almost as if we have the same death wish for America that Bibi Netanyahu has created for his own country. I mean, remember
Well,
the moment the war stops, Bibi goes in on trial for a
that's
multitude of crimes.
that's true. That's true. From where I'm sitting, I look at things. We know we're at the end of a financial life cycle, Jack. The central bank life cycle that is over. And BRICS has been around for 20 years. They've established their stable basket of currencies. They settle trade debts and trade imbalances in gold payments, right? Brazil and Russia can trade soybeans and oil, but somebody's going to have to pay gold because I think oil is just a tad bit more expensive and you can never buy as many soybeans as equating to oil. So knowing that we are so destabilized, we're so bankrupt, our dollar is inflated, and it doesn't matter what Washington D.C. says. Go to the store and pay for some stuff, and you'll know what we're talking about. So I do think that the only safe harbor, frankly, is to go back to some kind of asset-backed currency, and we aren't there yet. I think we're trying to, but again, the central banks want control. We're now learning Epstein was very involved in the development of Bitcoin. So if you thought Bitcoin was going to be your safe harbor of decentralization, think again. The Clarity Act will make sure that it's getting reported to the IRS. So much for that. The really only way to get back around this is to go back to hard assets and asset-backed currencies. And I think BRICS is a true threat. And I think the Chinese manufactured missiles that Iran has, their hypersonic missiles now, are a threat to our military. What Trump put a press release out a few months, when we bombed Iran the last time, hey, no more nuclear. And then we get a message from the administration last week, 10 days before they get a nuclear material again, or have enough enriched uranium. Excuse me. That was the technical answer. It's like the same recycled narrative to drive us into this. And I'm trying to figure out from where I'm sitting and listening to some of the stuff that Steve Bannon's talking about is to understand, are we doing this because we are feeling hogtied through the Epstein files and the City of London banks that we're beholden to and our central bankers? Or are we doing rope-a-dope with these guys? And, Israel hasn't fully recovered from their defense of the Iranian blast they took the last time. So, like you said, Israel is the one that was trying to put the brakes on, right? So I'm trying to figure out, how is this going to shake out? Are we going to eventually merge into some more of a BRICS-like system from where you're sitting?
Well, I think that what we're finding is that the whole world is losing faith in the US dollar, right?
Right.
And the American people, the American banking sector, our entire economy has had a free ride since Bretton Woods in 1947,
Right.
when the gold reserves of the central banks of Southeast Asia and Europe were depleted, and we needed to have some sort of settlement system. So the settlement system became US dollars, right? All
Right.
commodities would be priced in US dollars and settled in US dollars. So it didn't matter if you were Sri Lanka or England, you were required to keep your treasury filled with US dollar equivalents. That would be either our treasury debt or cash equivalents. And once that's not necessary for the rest of the planet to do anymore, we're in big trouble, because those
Sure.
central banks absorb a lot of our debt that wouldn't be sold in the United States, debt that would be purchased by Scott Besson in the U.S. Treasury in the biggest Ponzi, three-card Monte game in history. And
Right.
when we talk about some of these fears of the future, like that there has to be some sort of future where there's a real physical commodity that backs up the currencies of planet Earth, why haven't we seen uh, uh, an accounting of the gold reserves in Fort Knox or anywhere else? That would seem to be an easy thing that you should give the American people. And when you look at how we've been robbed as American people, so the 1968, say the average weekly salary was $160, right?
Right.
That's it. Average weekly salary today, and don't get upset with me, people, this is average, is like $1,500 a week now, right? Well, with $160 at gold at $34 an ounce,
Mm-hmm.
I could buy 5 ounces of gold back in 1968 if I wanted to play miserly.
Right.
Now I can't buy 5 ounces of gold.
You can't even buy a
I
half
can't even
ounce.
buy a quarter ounce of gold with the
Right.
weekly salary today.
Right.
So it just tells you how they, through inflation and the concomitant deflation of the value of the US dollar, they have robbed us all absolutely blind. And when you look at the US debt, when Gulf War One started, it was $3.5–4 billion, right? So we go into Gulf War One, and we've been at war there ever since.
Yeah.
And now it's at $40 billion. So in effect, fighting Israel's enemies has cost the American people more than two world wars, Korea, Vietnam, and the Cold War combined.
Mm-hmm.
For what? And, when you see the things that are on the Epstein stuff, and you know that they're blackmailing people, it should give cause to every American to be absolutely enraged, because they're not looking out for us anymore. They're
No, they
literally
haven't been.
looking out for their own skins. And you saw Marjorie Taylor Greene made that little comments about how the first thing that happened after she met with the victims was a call from Trump. You're going to hurt my friends. Really? Your friends raped children and robbed the American government for a foreign state, and your
Miraculously, they
worry
didn't
is
show
that
up
your
at the South
friends are going to
Tower.
be hurt?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is visceral at a certain point. What does it say about a culture that doesn't, that where the men aren't, selling their cloaks and buying swords to go hunt pedophiles?
That's right. Well, there are some. One of them is running for governor of Texas right now, Doc P. Chambers. I don't know if you're following that race, but this is the guy who's up against Abbott. Trump gave Abbott the nod. Turning Point Action gave Abbott the nod, and they tried to, rain on Doc's parade. And he's in a statistical dead heat. It is so powerful that Trump is actually flying out while we're in the process of going to war with Iran. He's going to go to Texas on Friday and stump for Greg Abbott. What does that tell you about what's happening in our country right now?
It tells you that we're captured. I mean,
Yeah.
think about what Trump did in the last couple weeks of his office last time. He could have pardoned all the J6ers before he
Yeah.
left, but
Before he
then
left.
Lindsey Graham and others would have impeached and convicted him, and his only penalty would be he could never run for office again. That's it.
Right.
He chose his own political future over 1,500 Americans. That alone, in my opinion, makes him unfit. But then he pardons people like Jared Kushner's father. I mean, Jared Kushner's father is the ambassador to France, but because he's such a dirtbag and has said so many outrageous things in France, he's not allowed to participate or even have meetings with anybody in the French government outside of the French Foreign Office because they don't want him there.
That's right.
Because he's obviously not playing, regular baseball. Just like we have Huffington talking about, well, if they want to take all of the Middle East, that's what the Bible says. It's like, wait a second, that's not what the president said. President doesn't even want him to take the West Bank, but he's still in his office. Lutnick and his family bet against the tariffs. He's still there. There has to be something that is
Pam
keeping
Bondi.
Trump from acting in a rational manner. And my guess, it's something selfish and depraved about himself.
Well, I want to rewind a little bit. You talked about gold. We haven't had any sort of an audit on gold. Trump is a big gold proponent. If you look at his True Social feed, Jack, you'll see gold ads really, sort of sprinkled throughout there. There's a guy named Josh Fair. He has a company out of, I think it was somewhere out of Arizona. I can't recall exactly where in Arizona, but he has some information on gold at this point. I wanted to see if you be interested in hearing what he has to say. It's a quick little video, but I want you to hear this right now because I think it's interesting. He's actually saying something a little bit different. Let's see if I can.
Hey, everybody. It's Josh Fair, Scottsdale Mint again. Hey, thanks for about 500,000 views in the last 12 hours or so on that first Elon Musk possibly going to be auditing gold. Wanted to follow up with part 2 here, getting quite a bit of questions. So I don't have all the answers, but I'm just going to go with what I think is essentially going down. So a lot of people say the gold's not there. And what happens when the audit shows that there is no gold there? And while that's quite the possibility, I don't think Trump likes to fail at pretty much anything, and either does Elon. And I'm going with firsthand experience here, firsthand knowledge. They have been flying gold into the United States out of Europe and mainly London. I know this for a fact on almost every flight starting before Christmas. These flights, typically a passenger flight, they'll spread the gold out, roughly 4 tons of gold. I'll let you guys do the math, roughly 32,000 ounces per pallet. They'll spread that out across the cargo. If the plane is full, as most of it was leading up to Christmas because of holiday travel, they could only get 2 tons. So if almost every single flight is that much gold coming in, and I know this firsthand from all the armed carriers. Guys, I work with these companies. I know them. In fact, one of them is going to be leasing space for me in my new facility in Wyoming, and handling gold coming in from both Europe for clients coming in and out. So I know this firsthand. So this amount of gold has been coming here. A lot of us, including myself, started noticing the exchange for physical premium that the banks were allowing, given a premium to bring the gold to the United States. Most of us thought it was only EFP, was only for tariff reasons. While that is 100% correct, we broke it on this X. If you've been following us, the beginning of February, it's saying that, hey, this is repatriation, which means they are bringing gold here for someone. Is that someone the U.S. government? I'm just trying to connect the dots. I don't know for sure. It wouldn't surprise me when Trump was talking about a golden era, remonetizing the balance sheets. You also have to think the new Treasury Secretary, he likes gold. So when they say, hey, we're going to make sure Fort Knox has the gold and then the other vaults have the gold, I think this is just a heads up that this is what's coming.
So hearing him say that, and I've listened to this guy, Jack, before, he seems very rational to me. Do you put credence and stock in what he's talking about, considering that, Trump is playing, could it be rope-a-dope with your passing genius and clarity and talking about Bitcoin and, stable coin and all this stuff? Or is that just sort of a soft off-ramp into hard asset-backed currency?
Well, if the U.S. Treasury was repurchasing gold, say, or repatriating gold that the U.S. Treasury had stored in the Bank of London or elsewhere in Europe, that doesn't change the amount of gold that we have, right? I would say it's probably U.S. government gold that's coming back, or it's gold that's going to be sold in what we've seen in the last several months, a huge spike in gold. But
Mm-hmm.
I was at Christmas time. I had dinner with a guy who manages money for the big tech billionaires. And he told me that they're all buying gold and have been buying gold for like the last 2 years. And because I'm a historian, I would never buy gold and keep it in custody in America because Roosevelt seized it all.
Right.
I said, so where are they? Where's the custody? He said UBS in Switzerland. So my sense is that we are underwater. Uh, I'm not one of these people who thinks Scott Besson is the greatest guy. I mean, let's not forget he bragged about collapsing the Iranian currency so that they could have the Mossad CIA riots that lasted as long as Elon's, thing could keep going. And the fact of the matter is, I don't believe it. I mean, I think that there's a time for these people to just become straight with the American people, and there's no reason we should have to rely on the specialized insight of a gold reseller in Arizona to come to the conclusion that something's not right. I think that a lot of you're also, if pallets are coming this way, pallets are going the other way too. And you see, there's a big attempt to have the German government wants to bring all their gold back from Bank of New York. All
Right.
of Europe, all of the entire world should
It's
ask for their
repatriating.
gold back from the United States. It's
Sure.
not safe. It's
So
politically not safe.
you brought up, not keeping it in the U.S. jurisdiction. Are you familiar with this company right here? It's called Abex Exchange. Have you heard of this company? They're out of Singapore and Canada.
Yeah, and Canada has always been a place because the Canadians never seized everybody's gold like Roosevelt did in, I think it was 33. Uh, Europe has never seized anyone's gold, but I see a time when the US just seizes it and gives everybody dollars like
Well,
they did last time.
this is why I'm bringing this company up, Abex Exchange and Abex Technology. They have a Singapore gold exchange. They actually have a depository in Singapore. As you probably know, it's out of U.S. jurisdiction. So that's a bonus to your point earlier. But this company actually is a true physical commodities exchange, the first of its kind since the ICE, the International Commodities Exchange. And what they do differently, besides being able to trade physical commodities like liquid natural gas, carbon credits, gold, silver, copper, battery metals, etc. Besides that, they also offer financial legal title to the actual asset that's moving from point A to point B and instantaneous T+0 settlement. So it is the first of its kind, and it's a fascinating company, but they provide a solution to moving commodities and, helping currencies be asset backed in real time, which is, I think a fantastic alternative to the status quo of today. So I was just curious if you were familiar with this company. I've been digging into them for a while, and
No,
I think they're absolutely brilliant.
no, but I think it's a great idea. But if you really want to look at where real gold is moving, look at the Shanghai commodities market that they've set up. They're trying to
Yep.
push London and Chicago out of the gold and silver market.
Well, that's
The
not going to be
Chi-
too hard.
the Chinese have also set up a gold depository in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, where it's two
Right.
sides of the room, right? We all put in $10 billion in gold. You want oil? We just slide some over. You want, plastic cups? We slide some over. Back and
Right.
forth. They're doing their trade in gold effectively with that depository. And one of the sad things that the United States did with the dollar, which was a huge error, and we've done it with Iran for 45 years. We threatened to do it with the Swiss in 22. That's why they gave up their neutrality over Ukraine. We threatened to go after all their banks, and we threatened to remove them from the SWIFT system. If you're not on the SWIFT system, you're dead in the water, right?
Right.
Well, as soon as somebody begins to make alternatives to the SWIFT system, it'll be the dollar that is dead in the water because
That's right.
any sentient person knows that there's no possible way we pay back 40 trillion, especially when we're adding another trillion every 6 to 7 weeks. So, something has to give. And I think Trump's mission is to make sure that nothing collapses on his watch. This is why they're all so interested in, I don't know why you care about girls. The Dow's at 50,000. points, or
That
$50,000,
was a
as
classic Bondi line.
the
I can't
genius
believe she said
Bondi
it.
said. But I guess what I'm saying is that something is going to break. Now, do I know which hammer blow is going to make it all fall? It's going to be, if we look historically, military defeats are very good at encouraging chaos in the markets. So
Right.
maybe that's why we're thinking twice about Iran. And you look at what
Well,
happened in
maybe it is
Venezuela.
going to be the defeat. Maybe this is where the central banks get defeated. This is where, this is coming out of London and their bully whip in Israel, who is then shaming us into being a partner in their criminal activity.
Well, but if Donald Trump was planning to sink a carrier battle group so as to fulfill his 4D chess plan, then he's a more awful person than we've even discussed him as. That's the
Right.
problem, right?
Right. I would
So,
hope that, yeah, I hope that's not the case. I really don't believe he would
I
sacrifice
mean,
20,000 people on a carrier.
if you just look at Israel, how is this tiny country, their largest single export is finished diamonds, right? How's that possible? There are no diamonds in Israel. Where are they getting them from? They're getting them from half of the chaotic places of Africa,
Hmm.
right? I mean, none of this is good, and none of it accrues to our benefit. And everybody's talking about, oh, they're killing Christians in Nigeria and the Sahel and all this. I get it. Sure, they are. But one of the reasons they're killing them is because the entire region has been flooded with small arms because we took out Gaddafi, right? Those arms are
Right.
in the hands of the people killing the Christians now.
That's
Well
right.
done. And why did we take out Gaddafi? Well, there were two
Gold.
reasons. Israel wanted us to,
Yeah.
and Gaddafi was going to start demanding that we pay for his sweet crude, which provides like half the gasoline in Europe and about 20% of the gasoline on the east coast of the United States that we ship from Marseille because we haven't built a new refinery since 1972.
Correct.
This is how broken everything is. And this pretense that we're going to build back better, something new is going to come. I mean, my God, how much money do you think it costs to keep two carrier battle groups on station in the middle of the Gulf of Arabia? A lot. That's money that could be used to pave streets, to do anything.
That's right. It's more investment over there and not right here, which is what we need to be doing. So,
And
Jack, I could go down a million roads with you right now because you've got a lot to talk about, but I brought you on because I wanted to, get your position on what is going on with Bannon, the War Room, Epstein. If I was to just ask you on a broad scale, the Epstein boomerang, where is going to be the biggest fallout from the Epstein boomerang?
I think the biggest fallout for the Epstein boomerang is the relationship between the United States of America, certainly the citizens of this great country, and the state of Israel, and the Quislings here in the United States who put that state before our country. I think that's the biggest fallout. I think that's why they never wanted to reveal who was really running Epstein. I think this is why they didn't want to reveal what happened with Hunter, because people would be like, wait a second. So, like, Mossad can take down the vice president's son and nobody does anything?
That's
Yep,
right.
nobody does anything. And I think that the greatest fear that they could all possibly have, and this is why you hear this nonsense of, oh, Qatari Carlson and Russia this and Russia that. It's all to deflect from the reality that we have an absolutely sordid, broken, one-way relationship with Israel where they rob us. They got their nuclear 90% enriched uranium because they stole it from us. And we know
Right.
that they stole it from us. It's well documented. Did anything happen? No, because then the American people might think that, the Israelis aren't really nice people. Anything
Right.
happen with Epstein? No, because the American people might decide that the Israelis aren't really nice people. Anything happen with Hunter? No, all for the same reason. This is a protection racket for a nation state that uses its status as a nation state to essentially run a global criminal empire that is destroying half the planet.
Jack, one last thing. I played this yesterday. Dershowitz was on Pierce Morgan, and Pierce Morgan was asking him about Epstein and Mossad, and his response was quite interesting. And of course, we all know Dershowitz is in the Epstein files, and he was very irate for being considered a criminal for being in the Epstein files. But I want to get your take on this.
Could it be
Of
that
course.
Jeffrey Epstein just had a completely different life that he just did not tell you about? And it may also have included being a spy. I mean, clearly.
Telling me that he worked for the Mossad would have given him a get out of jail free card. I could have gotten him no jail time. If he had told me he worked for the Mossad, for the CIA, it would have been a slam dunk for me to go to whoever I had to go to, even up to the President of the United States, and I would have gotten him a deal with no time at all.
Hang on a second. You mean if he'd said he was working with the Mossad or CIA, then he would get off being a pedophile?
That's right.
You know,
Speaking the truth?
He said the quiet part out loud. I mean, somebody told me, great U.S. intelligence guy said, look, there's three kinds of agents, right? They're the ones who just go home and try to get on with their lives and, got a Glock 19 in, every drawer of every piece of furniture in the house. They're the ones who realize, like, hey, I'm pretty good at being a criminal. I'm just going to continue on being a criminal. That's
Yes.
probably the majority. And then
Right.
they're the ones who are living in the mountains of the Philippines, just trying to forget everything with a bottle and a woman. But there are multiple cases where U.S. intelligence agents went too far, and then we get some group like usually like the French or someone like that to whack them. But they don't ever want to put any of these people inside a courtroom. I mean, they have retirement homes for these people. Where they just, marry, talk to the stone wall, nothing more, We live in a house of mirrors where we are all meant to pretend it's little kids, like saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And then they take people like me and people like my siblings and people like everyone we know, and they play upon your patriotism, and you join up and you do your duty, and you think that you live in this world of white and black, and then you realize, no, it's like a sordid vomit colored brown that actually runs everything. And the white and black doesn't exist except when we're trying to get you to join up and give your life for some nonsensical foreign foray. And how many have we had now? Vietnam, all of the Gulf Wars, Afghanistan. What has it got in America? Nothing. Less than
Exactly.
nothing. And it's wounded and destroyed millions of lives. Broken some of the best people America's ever produced, left broken. But Howard Lutnick still got his job.
Yes, he does. Howard Lutnick is still there, and over 650 families lost their loved ones in Cantor Fitzgerald that day. Husbands, fathers, brothers, etc., wives. Yeah, this is terrible.
I lost a lot of friends that day, literally. A lot of people who I knew and did business with, I lost that day. And I have one friend who lost his brother, and he's literally never recovered. He's had a ruined life because of what happened. And again, we still don't know what happened, do we? Right? How did Building 7 fall? Like, we all sit around, watch YouTube shorts of like, take down the big building. I've never seen one that was like planned to come down that came down as cleanly as those three did.
Right. Yeah, it's that's in those files, and I think we will eventually get to the bottom of it. But it's not because Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, or anybody in the DOJ. We just don't have a Department of Justice. We got a few good people in there, and they're few and far between, and they're basically outmanned and outgunned, and they're being stuffed in closets because they're too effective and they're getting too appreciated by people who actually think they're going to do something, or at least attempt to do something to bring accountability, which I don't think we're going to see. Sad to say.
Think of the whistleblowers that came out of the FBI in support of Trump the last go around. They still haven't gotten their jobs back.
I know.
Right? I mean, what about this Gold Star mother who's in jail in
Tina Peters.
Colorado?
Tina Peters.
Like,
I tried to get in to see her. I sent requests. I sent emails. I filled out their application. Everything for La Vista Correctional Facility. Crickets.
Well, where's the president in his bully pulpit getting her
Why is
released.
he on Air Force One? He's going to Texas on Friday. He could fly up to Colorado in about 40 minutes from there and get her out, bring the marshals and the
Well,
national secretary.
he couldn't get her out because it's a state crime, but he could certainly go visit her and be like,
I
well, I
beg to
mean,
differ.
any guy who's said like 18 times Bibi Netanyahu deserves a pardon, maybe he
Right.
could just one time say Tina Peters needs one.
Well, she did. He pardoned her, but what he needs to do is just reclassify her as a federal witness. She is a federal witness to a federal crime. She has the evidence. That's all that this is about. I don't care if she's in a state prison. That was a sham show trial.
Well, but the problem is that, and this is why the SAVE Act is such a joke.
It's
The
never going to pass.
Constitution clearly gives the right to the states to
Correct.
run their elections however they want. This is why we needed a 17th Amendment for direct election of senators, people. So the Republican Party has spent a year and a half with this kabuki nonsense that we just passed this SAVE Act and we're going to change everything. No, you're
No,
not.
it's not gonna
California is going to be like, that means nothing to us. Here's the Constitution. But it's almost as if they never even read the document that they swear to. And the same thing was true with tariffs. I
Right.
mean, that was clearly the function of the Congress. But not if Donald Trump's in charge, because in 4D chess, there's rules that regular people don't know about.
Jack
It's-
Maxey, pretty amazing. Stay in touch. I know you're up in the Northeast, ferrying out the weather up there. Hopefully, it's going to stay not as bad as they predicted. Hopefully, it won't be another snowmageddon where they're raining all the chemical poisons they keep spraying into our atmosphere. That, for whatever reason, despite all the people crying about that, doesn't seem to stop either. So
Well,
it's
listen,
not
the
getting better,
American
Jack, is
people
it?
have to realize that this is your country. It's
Right.
not their country. It's not the bankers' country. It's not the rich elite pedophiles' country. It's your country.
That's
And you
right.
need to take it back. If I had to give anyone any advice for this fall, I'd be like, don't vote for anybody who can't say genocide. Don't vote for anybody who's endorsed by Trump. And don't vote for any incumbent in the House who's not Thomas Massey, because all the rest of them have been compromised.
Yeah.
I mean, Jordan and Comer are more useless than teats on a boar hog. And let's not forget Ted Cruz and all the rest on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I delivered them Hunter's laptop July 8th of 21. They never did anything.
Crickets. There you go. We've been around the world with Jack Maxey today, folks. Jack, next time you're in Florida, give me a ping. Grab lunch.
I will. I should be down there sometime.
I'm
the
in
next
touch
6
with your
months. I'll
sister
give her a
from time
call.
to time, and she's a riot, by the way.
She's a lot of fun, that's for sure. She's the nice
a
one.
lot of fun. She's a good egg. I really like her. I'm trying to remember
Yeah.
where I met her. It was some conference somewhere. Who the heck knows where in this country? But she's a patriot, that's for sure.
100%. 100%. I mean, even she's doesn't want to hear some of the stuff I say because it's so shocking, right? You support all these organizations. We grew up in an FBI, CIA family,
Yeah.
right? And then, all of a sudden you're like, these are the worst organizations on planet Earth. It's hard to come to grips with it. Same thing with Israel. 5 years ago, I would have given my life for Israel. Now
Sure.
I'm like, play that song again.
Oh gosh. All right, Jack. It's great to see you. Thank you for your time today. I do
All right.
appreciate it. And
God
as
bless.
always, your candor is pretty raw, but it's it's the reality of some of the situations we see going on here. So thank you very much.
All right, you take care now.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye. Folks, Jack Maxey, I did an interview with him several years ago on the Hunter Biden laptop, and it was an explosive interview back then. And it's, Jack Maxey at his rarest and raw form. He doesn't hold anything back, as you can see. You might not agree with everything. You might agree with all of it. I don't know. That's for you to decide. But I can tell you that, some of the people I know that he's familiar with, I know them to be not so great people either. I've had my own personal experiences. So more on that in the not too distant future, because, there's things that I have not revealed and I've had to weather only because I'm a person that speaks my mind and speaks what I think is the truth, what I believe it to be anyway, based on what I know in front of me, not just conjecture or not rumor, but what I can look up and read and research and source in multiple directions. And, I think it's important that we keep our eyes open. And again, I think Bannon has done a great job in rallying the troops. I think it's an unfortunate fall from grace to have this information coming out about him in the Epstein files. But again, you are sometimes the company that you keep on a regular basis. And so I think there's more to learn from all of this. And Jack Maxey is one source. I'd welcome Steve to come on and rebut, refute, or respond to anything Jack says. Because again, it is ultimately about the truth. I'm going to leave you with this. This is a guy that, Steve revered and worked for, and then ultimately ran his company after he passed away. And this is where we are today. It's the state of the information war. Have a good afternoon.
All the people that have gone out there against the mainstream media and said, you're going to call us racist, you're going to call us potential Timothy McVeighs, fuck you.